Now, the fact is that the moment we feel a contraction, like just that simple movement in Healing 2 that you say, oh, I've got a block here, you're already in a non-dual position. There's the block and there is that which is able to feel it. In its broadest, most without content, you're in a non-dual position, just by being able to feel, to sense. Now, the deeper truth about this is that even before you felt the contraction, you were in a non-dual position. You're always already in a non-dual position, in the non-dual. It's the chief and most defining quality of non-duality, of the non-dual space, is that it's not something that you do or you can get or that you can find or that you can develop. It was always already here. It never gets lost. Whatever we do, whatever's done to us, whatever we suffered, whatever we enjoyed, all of this is just part of the flow of form. The non-dual aspect was always already here. For some people this is kind of outrageous because they go seeking, and then one day, randomly having given up everything, there's this whoosh, and then it's like, oh, that's a joke. It's like it made absolutely no difference at all. It's like a cat chasing its tail. It was already here. I didn't have to do anything. Nobody has to do anything. And then there's a subtle twist where for a while they get stuck in that. Like no one has to do anything. So what's the point? You know what I mean? So the next stage of service isn't yet activated, of togetherness and deeper integration into the physical, into compassion. So this is the chief thing. So in a way we come up first with the first contraction, the first primary other in our lives, and that other is called God. The concept of God. The God which is other than us. And we have this, I'll write it down because the spelling's a bit weird, this fundamental kind of human duality in relation to God, which is, you recognize this from your kind of churches and mosques and stuff. You recognize these descriptors of God. You know, God is omnipotent. Omni means one. Potent means powerful. So God is all powerful. He's omnipotent. God is omniscient. Means all knowing, but like the one knowing. But it's also, because it's sentient, it's also sensing, the one feeling, the one that feels it all, that knows it all. And then the third point, which is a way containing this, in a way it's kind of omnipresent. Omnipresent. The omnipresence of God. God is everywhere, present in everything.
What was the meaning of the first word?
Omnipotent is all-powerful, the almighty, the all-powerful, the one, Church of England. Dear Lord, you are so very, very, very powerful. And omniscient is all-knowing, which means he sees our shame. It's a he, of course. And omnipresent means that there's no space away from him.
No escape.
Present everywhere, all present. So culturally and collectively we made this other, this incredible, great triangle of non-duality, the omnipresence. And rather than seeing that presence itself is what we are, and there is nothing that we can feel where we're not present, that feeling and thinking and hurting our foot, it all depends on the omnipresence of ourself. We kind of push it away somewhere else, and we say, I am that, I am this one, the separate self. This is other. So this, in a way, this separate self, and remember that the cement of this is all the contractions: fear, anger, jealousy, hatred, despair, hope. This is the cement in the contraction. So this one is the one we believe we are. This is our kind of, in a normal situation, the final reality. This is the person that we believe ourselves to be. It's also the person that we're trying to work with in a clinical environment. So another person like this, working with another person like this, is going to come up with all kinds of activations of the cement, which maybe there's a positive effect because it heals together. You know, this one also has a blotch here of shame, and it kind of, this one's resonating, so this one resonates with that, and together maybe there's a movement towards innocence, which is here. So the whole aim of non-dual therapy is to begin to consolidate in the non-dual space, which was always here, which can never be taken away, which can't be gained, which can't be lost. It can only be clouded by this person.
It's basically, it starts as a surrender to your true nature. That's our true nature.
So that's classic non-dual teaching, kind of. And between this omnipresent Almighty God, are we teaching you that you are the omnipresent Almighty God?
Yes.
Yes, we are. But that's hard to swallow. It creates a contraction. And it's interesting because the immediate contraction it creates is I'm not good enough, and it can't be me, and it's like too much responsibility. It's all that stuff is immediately activated the moment we even suggest that. So slightly absurd, isn't it? And I don't want to get too much into philosophical, but basically when you get to this space of the omnipresent, omniscient, you are everything and you're also absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So there is a pure balance and naturalness there at the same time. It's totally and utterly not a problem. Because there's no time and space, it's really okay. So this separate self figure is utterly and totally, and this is classic theology, this one has no existence at all, no manifestation, nothing happening without this one. The little bit that he knows is coming from the omniscience, the little bit that he feels of power inside himself, poor chap, is coming from the omnipotent. This is the source of that. You take this away, this becomes it just vanishes, like a hologram. The person we think we are. What's beautiful is when we move into this, the hologram shines more brightly, but it's not a problem anymore. It loses its blocks, but it's of service to the whole as a hologram. It's more the confusion of identity, or the contraction of identity, because identity is a kind of contraction. It's like saying mine. It's a grasping. Yeah. So between this and that, we're not getting a lot of therapy done. We've got a priest in the Catholic Church, a very holy one. So what we discovered was that in the movement into the physical, like what we are physically here now, there are certain definable aspects, which is a reflection in a way of the physical. Ultimately it's everything and nothing. But there's definable subtle aspects which come forward, which exist independently of this physical life, which we call the non-dual positions. And these also exist outside of time and space, meaning they can't be got, they can't be grasped, they can't be lost. They always are already here. Again, this is so important. It's something which we see when the contraction falls away. It was always there, but when the person falls away, this becomes clear. But it was always there. That's how it becomes clear. It's intimately familiar. It's not like other at all. So these non-dual positions are in their quality, and now we're moving into, in a way, our true nature, because there is the source of who we are, and then there is the nature of it, the kind of true nature of the source of who we are. This is before we are born in the physical body. The qualities in it, as recognized from the perspective of a human being, physical body, because I don't know how else we can, that's the only thing we can say for sure, is that it's from our perspective as a physical human being. So, among these non-dual positions, the obvious big one is unity, the concept, in a way. And the concept can give a guideline, in a way, something to trust, of being all one. That at source we're all of the same stuff, which isn't so radical when you break it down. You know, we're made of the same physical molecules, the same particles, the same chemicals are creating the same kind of emotions, the same kind of thoughts. The nature of thought is the same. We breathe the same air. You know, even on the level of the physical, this unity on inquiry becomes increasingly clear. But in real time, in entanglement, and entanglement is when two contractions are healing each other as one, in a way. You know? It can be a need to, in a way, and this is what Thich Nhat Hanh says, to push away with some force the idea of a separate self, because it's so programmed deeply, so invasive on the different levels, to say, no, I'm not a separate self, to kind of move it away. Also when teaching, there's a necessity to kind of push away a little bit the person. Otherwise you just talk about yourself the whole time and your issues, and you know what I mean? And the person gets out the way, in a sense. It's also true when you are an artist and you're painting, you're creating something. At a certain stage, the person is gone, and there's this unity with the creation, and that's when the best stuff comes straight through consciousness, expressing itself through you. The person, in a way, disappears for moments, which is quite ecstatic. This experiences of unity, but still, it's a non-dual position. It's not an end point. It's part of our true nature, in a way. Another one, which is primary, and we really, it goes on and on to the details, but we try and stick with the core stuff, is freedom. And so, with our dualistically programmed minds, we have this, for example, confusion set up, and that's part of the whole non-dual therapy, reprogramming it in a way that freedom has an opposite, which is slavery, meaning you can lose your freedom. Yeah, it can be taken away, it can be damaged, it can be abused. And this is not true. And I don't want to just kind of dictate it's not true. You need to look for freedom inside yourself that's always been there. But the real duality that's playing out there is between slavery and liberation. Liberation is not freedom. Liberation is a movement out of something. Slavery is also not a restriction of freedom, because we are just as free in any position of slavery as we are in whatever position, in a position of liberation. So that's a strong non-dual position and a strong resonance to bring into any kind of relationship or therapeutic context. Of course, immediately it brings up fear. Freedom, it kind of has this thing going on with fear as well. And fear is the conditions why we're not free. I can't be free while this could happen, and while this could happen, and while this person exists. It's like, Donald Trump is in the world. Let me be free. So this is why it's important not to get too pedagogic about it, because everything's interlinked. But freedom is a key non-dual position. Love is a key non-dual position. Care, inherent tendency of itself, of the source, to care for form. And it's not taking care or controlling, it's really the movement of caring, the softness of benevolent holding, this instinct to make good, to relieve suffering where possible, which happens of itself. Innocence is a non-dual position. Now this can be, for some, really harsh as a concept, that innocence is always here, never lost, never taken away, can never be damaged, can't be got from the outside. No court can make you innocent. And it's partly hard for us because collectively we are very, very caught in guilt. Sense of being inherently wrong, which is not surprising if we believe ourselves to be this one, and this is what we've been taught, the person. Because it's a kind of lie to believe that that's what we are, this thing that we created, that we keep creating and tweaking. So that's a first reason for guilt. So the duality of guilt is accusation. And this is the nature of the dualities. And if we take this one as an example, but I hope accusation is when
Schuldiging.
Yeah. So this is something I should have said about contractions. It was on the cheat sheet. In this boundaries of the separate self, where there's a contraction, it's got two sides. It's got the side, the energetic side, where you take it inside on yourself. That's the guilt. And that's one way to freeze it as guilt inside yourself. And it's got the other side where you say it's because of him, the accusation. But it's the same energy contracted. So this cement of the separate self, it's actually not even glued to you, it's between people in a way. So there's a belief, because it's so impossible to feel this guilt, that there is some temporary relief when I give it to Betty. It's her, she is
because
not good
of
enough.
Betty.
She's the reason that all those Jews got killed. But it's the same thing. It's the same energy, and you can feel through it, and you can feel it's the same guilt and accusation have got the same contraction of innocence happening. So the non-dual aspect, like here, let's say here, there's a whole load of guilt and accusation. So there's arrows flying out towards ISIS and Donald Trump. And here, these arrows are just in a way increasing the contraction. It's separating more. It's feeding back this energy, the accusation towards others. It's not helping, but it gives a temporary relief because it feels like it's off you. But the guilt stays because we're one. So I'm Donald Trump. Donald Trump is me. I'm ashamed because he's ashaming. So what, in the case of guilt and accusation, what both the sides of the contraction are looking for is innocence. Why would we bother accusing anybody of anything if we didn't want them to get innocent? You're a bad father. You want him to be a good father. You want him to show how he's innocently a bad father so that the connection can come back. Guilt is also frozen innocence in a way. It doesn't believe anymore that innocence exists. And it's contracted in a way that, but it's screaming from the very pores of itself for that innocence. Please, redeem me, make me innocent. It's a very tough, hard energy, which is often cemented through networks of patterns of how we relate to others. But it's really, really worthwhile, for example, in a therapeutic context or in any context, when you meet somebody and they're accusing this, that, and the other, to realize that what they're suffering from is guilt. It's not the first thing we would think of. And often if you ask, are you feeling guilty about something? They'll say, no. So it's very much with gloves on, softly, softly. And that means letting the accusation run its course, totally unconditionally hear it, because they're talking about themselves, in a way. So we just stay with the guilt and accusation duality, because it's a good example. The contraction divides us from others. It's like a kind of depression. It separates us from the next one. We lose the unity, we lose the love, we lose the peace. But not necessarily sitting in unconditional love with somebody who you think is a total bastard and you want to accuse to hell is honest. But contacting your own innocence inside yourself and just being loyal to innocence inside yourself while sitting with Donald Trump is honest. It happens then of itself. The revelation of the innocence behind the damage that's happened.
It's even so that when we kind of connect with our own innocence inside ourselves, and we sit opposite to Donald Trump, then immediately what will happen is that we feel the connection with an innocence in Donald Trump, which is never lost. Also, it's there. Even if you think about it, you can feel the innocence in the guy. It's there. It's never lost. And this position, because immediately there is a connection in this non-dual positions, a unity, has the healing factor.
So in a way, the agenda of the contraction in this case is to get that innocence. So what we do from the non-dual position is totally allow that innocence. We give it the innocence that it's seeking. And then we see what happens. There's a resonance to that particular non-dual aspect. It has a resonance, it has a quality, we can feel it. And so part of the training is to get more attuned to those resonances, which again, they're always there. So it's not a matter of getting so much attuned to the resonances as removing the stuff which blocks it inside ourselves. So it becomes easier for it to come forward of itself. Because it's not like diagnostic, okay, it's guilt, so I've got to come with some innocence. you know what I mean? It's like, because for example, in this instance, with guilt and accusation and innocence, there's a whole lot of anger, there's a whole lot of fear, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on, and what we need is for everything to be as free as possible within ourselves, even if the person is put out the way temporarily through the movement to the body, that what's needed comes forward of itself, like with the artist painting. That it moves through us, it has the freedom to move through us. The other scenario is that if it's blocked, and we thought we got the person out of the way, but the guilt stayed. So there becomes an agenda to avoid it, and that in a way can, in the end it will have a healing effect as well, because it will explode it between the two, the guilt and accusation, and they have a big fight, like, you're my therapist, it's like, you said you'd take care of me. It will explode anyway, but there's less wisdom in it. There's less truth in it. It's less conscious then. So another way to describe it is that within the contraction of guilt and accusation, this is frozen innocence, and it's contracted in time and space, and it's not like it goes anywhere until it's released back to innocence. It's kind of vibrating all the time. It's vibrating like a compact nuclear bomb in a way. And we make extra efforts to avoid it, and even unconsciously it begins to be like a bypass we make around the guilt. Like this, and ingenious ways to avoid this feeling, because past experience has told us that it never moves. It's just how it is. We carry this block.
And can I say a few words? What's important when you look to such a block, there is a kind of truth in this block to us. There is beliefs around the block which feel so much more truth as anything else in our lives. So we kind of, we are alive in the moment and we feel happy, then something happens, and at once we come into this truth, and this is the reality, this is true. This is so true. And we start responding according to the block. We start to accuse, we start to kind of, say, when you hear it later back, when you're out of the contraction, you say, okay, I didn't really mean it, whatever.
But sometimes it's too late, because we recruit.
Yeah.
Like Donald Trump, you go recruiting others who say the same thing, and before you know it, it's a consensus, and it gets very, very ugly, and you're caught within that judgment in a way.
Yeah.
Guilt is very connected with judgment.
what's important is to recognize the incredible truth we feel in such a moment. When we are in a contraction, nobody loves me. When we're in the contraction of nobody loves me, there is not a single thought in our minds which thinks, maybe somebody loves me. Nobody loves me. This is really, I'm totally alone. It's all my fault. It's all because of me. I'm not okay. These are the building stones of the separate self, or a few of the building stones of the separate self. And they feel so true. But the moment we are in innocence, we become aware that this is an illusion. But at that moment, and that's important to realize, it feels so true. It's just, the contraction is our whole horizon. This is how it is. And somewhere in the back of our minds, we feel lucky when we are not in a contraction, because then we have the space to do differently. But the real truth is the contraction. This will come forward at a certain moment, and then it's reality again. There is an incredible addiction to this.
I recognize a little bit when I feel more free that I on purpose start checking if the other thing is also still there, or if it's also still in the. I kind of hope that it's gone at that moment, but it never is like that. It's always like, oh, never, it's still there.
Yeah. So that's really, really important point, which is that the non-dual position isn't either or with a person. It contains the person with all its contractions. So when you return inside to the kind of beyond the duality, it doesn't make the contraction go away. At least not by choice. It doesn't of itself fix anything. It's always was always there. It doesn't need to fix anything. It's utterly complete in inside itself. So, for example, the innocence is utterly full. It's utterly satisfied. It's fulfilled. It's unquestionable. It's undamageable. So it doesn't need to do anything with guilt. It really doesn't care or have any entanglement with guilt. But the guilt utterly and totally depends on the innocence. So the non-dual contains the contraction and the person and the whole thing. And the person utterly and totally depends on the non-dual, including the contraction. The contraction depends on the non-dual, even to be a contraction. It depends on the innocence. Guilt depends on innocence in order to exist. Accusation depends on innocence in order to exist. It's sourced in that innocence. So it doesn't need to go away of itself. It can be a fist, and the innocence is the whole body, and here's the contraction, which is part of the body. It's still there. And why is that so important? From the perspective of the person who's like this big, and here's the contraction in the middle, you really want to get rid of it. It's horrific. And so you have a flip into the non-dual space. Oh, I am the universe. And you say, oh, I hope it's gone so I can get back into my person again. and then I'll be perfect, and then all the other dualities come forward, It's like, but from the perspective of here, when it's we really relax, and this is the consolidation into the non-dual, this is tiny. That's the first stage. It's relative to the beauty of the trees and how they wind around each other. There's contractions all over the place. Nature itself is a kind of contraction. Seen from one perspective, it's just a phenomena. It's not who you are. You're not living in it only. You're living in peace and love and unity, and there's this contraction, which is that little guilt blob. The other thing is, and this we'll talk about more tomorrow, is that it's not your private guilt. It's a contraction of form. So if you inherit one finger less from your grandmother, is this your fault? That it ran through the family for generations. The difference with the energy and the physical, with the congenital thing, is that we do inherit the energy from generations. We come into this Maya world for a reason, for a service of reuniting, bringing home that stuff in a way, so that it can evolve in this way. So there's a service to the whole, to the grandmothers, to the great-grandmothers, to the other, to the children, and all of this, in allowing it to be there. And that's the one thing that nobody ever did, which is why there's a contraction, was to give it that time and space. So it stayed contracted. So the more we stay in the innocence, just staying in it, and seeing innocence, perceiving through innocence, also seeing the innocence of the contraction, the innocence of the guilt, the more it begins to realize its own innocence, which it's made of. It's frozen innocence. It's like, it's a temperature thing. A good metaphor is temperature. It's like warm water moving around ice, rather than the ice being in a fridge. So the warm water, slowly there's a melting process that begins to happen where the ice becomes water again, the water of innocence. But we can't control it, and this is really the tricky thing, because if we have this agenda to get rid of it in ourselves or in the other, we're contracting it more. We're limiting time, we're limiting space. Oh, it's already Friday, it's not gone yet. It's like, and that's but that's how we work, isn't it? It's like, and actually the greatest healing thing, and this is the giving of time and space, is releasing all agenda to get rid. Now, let's say that it was closer to you than the person you love most in the world. It was a lost soul, contracted. Somebody like a child, because that's what it is, it's a child of innocence guilt. Then that's the movement. It's like not getting rid of it, but holding it with all the innocence, seeing all the innocence in it, or feeling all the love for it. It's really a movement of allowance. It's not like you find an abandoned child in your energy system and it's like, okay, but first wash your face and let's get the head lice out of you, and you know what I mean? And I want you by 1 o'clock home. It doesn't work like that, because it's resistant in itself as a reflex. It's kind of saying, no, I'm afraid. So that's really, really, really important everywhere. The agenda to get somewhere, this is caught in time and space. It's a kind of contraction agenda. We really need to, just as we need to kind of train ourselves to move beyond the concept of a separate self, the belief in a separate self, we need to train ourselves to move beyond agenda, with ourselves and with others. It's on the edge, it's almost deeper than controlling others' agenda. It's in itself a kind of contraction, kind of dictation of what should be. Now, it's really, when you really look into it and inquire into agenda, it's crazy, because you want to get rid of something, but you don't even know what it is yet, because you didn't feel it. The agenda to get rid can be so strong that the thing is not allowed to be. So that's like trying to heal a skin infection without actually looking at it, or admitting it's there in the first place, feeling what's happening with it. There's no moving around the stage where we utterly and totally sense and allow and open our consciousness and open the source to whatever the contraction is. It's just not going to decontract, otherwise there's going to be no transformation. And of course, transformation always looks like pain. It looks like suffering. Suffering is transformation happening. So in the agenda to get rid, it's like, okay, I come into this non-dual space and now it hurts more than ever. I feel so condemned. I feel so guilty. I feel so worthless and all of this. That's actually a good thing. Because something is moving. You're feeling the feelings. What was insentient, what was anesthetized is coming to life. And coming to life is a non-dual space. You'll see it on the list. Life is always here. The duality there is that the opposite of birth is death. Life has no opposite. In life, death and birth are one. And this you see throughout nature. The cycle of form, of birth, rebirth, death, rebirth, death, rebirth, death. The belief in death as a final ending is very much caught in the belief in time. Past, present, future. So there's one duality, we skip to the guilt, but there's one duality which is always going to show up beyond the philosophical thing of the time and space and the body and the mind and the heart. And this is the raw, first survivalist reflex of the separate body to survive as a body within the whole. And that's the duality of fear and anger. And in a way, it's everywhere in every contraction as well. So, in the simple physical level, when there is a physical threat, the reaction is fear and anger. It's almost one. The anger is towards the other, the fight, and the fear is towards the self. Now, we did it probably in Healing Principle, the basic reactions to fear, to a perceived threat from the other, from the outside, which is to freeze, flight, fly, run away, or fight. So what's overlooked in conventional psychology is that the fight is actually anger. Right? It's not a fear response, it's an anger response. It's just how it's been judged and categorized and put down. So fear and anger is here as a duality. Like we can either be afraid when there's anger arising in the room, or we can kind of join with the anger. It's the same movement. This is here for as long as we're alive, in a way. It's part of the physical organism. It's part of the mechanism, if it's allowed. It's very, very fast-moving energy between people. And when it's free, often it doesn't look like what we would conventionally call fear and anger. It looks more like sensitivity and strength, but it's still the raw ingredients moving through, if it's free, if it's not contracted, attached. But the problem is we have things we're allowed to be afraid of and things we're not allowed to be afraid of, things we're told to be afraid of. We have our own natural spontaneous fear, which is almost a constant, because it really is like sensitivity. When you sense into the unknown, fear comes forward, and it's almost like the same thing as sensitivity, the ability to allow that fear. It's allowing the sensing. And this is everywhere. And the non-dual position for that is compassion. But to make sense of that, it's perhaps necessary to say a little bit about what compassion is. So, within this whole empty, still, non-dual space, there's no deadness. It's not fixed, it's not rigid, it's all alive and it's all happening now. And within this happening now, there is creation. Creation manifesting through duality, left arm, right arm, up, down, left, east, west, male, female. And the motor behind that is passion. And it's like really felt from the cells of the body, like an energy moving up, Kundalini style. It's like this passion, when you know something's really right for you and you're able to move with it unconditionally. It's like consciousness is moving through the ass and out into the world expressing itself. This is passion. If we don't identify or hold on or grasp or push it away. Compassion is, com means to be together. So compassion is being in the passion together. So exactly the same passion that moves through me and surfaces, by the way, as fear and anger, as it moves through, is moving through the other as well. It's the same fear and anger. It's not separate. It's like this energy resonance. It's a voltage. So it only becomes what we classically call fear and anger when it contracts as separate self. This is my fear, my anger. I'm afraid of you. I'm angry at you. When it's taken like that, first there's the contraction, which of itself will release very quickly, but then if the mind gets involved, if the heart gets involved, if the perceived threat, the pain behind it, the unresolved depression or the unresolved grief gets behind it, then it says that it's about me and you, about me and the other, about me and God, shake your fist at God. Which is a very real movement, by the way. My grandmother never believed in anything religious at all. And when she lost my father, her son, after having lost her husband, this atheist, humanistic woman shook her fist at God. It's like, which is a healthy thing to do, because it was more true than the kind of non-belief in a way. It was a deeper layer. Bless her. Granny Johnson. So that's a core duality which we meet again and again. So the compassion thing, which is always here. We don't need to do anything to be compassionate. It is happening by itself to the cellular level. If somebody in this room goes into incredible pain, in a certain way, we all experience the pain. We all, of ourselves, move to alleviate it, to make safe, to take care. Sometimes it's an ethic to remember compassion when we get very caught in a contraction and the other one seems like a demon from hell, and to remember, in a way, to replace ourselves in the other as a practice. So it's a key practice of the Tibetans, to replace yourselves in the feet of the other. And the ones that feel most strange to you. Actually, there's a meditation where it begins with you replace yourself in the shoes of your worst enemy, the worst, and then the next stage is somebody neutral, who you don't actually care, like the postman, one way or the other about, and then the next somebody who's very, very close to you. And what's amazing with that, it's called Tiong Long. I can't really speak Tibetan. What's amazing about it is that the last is often the most difficult. To replace yourself in the shoes of the one who's really close to you.
Really, 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 really intimate with
it's much easier to be compassionate to
enemies. To have an enemy is a very intimate relationship.
So this movement of compassion is happening all the time. Now, I don't know how much you know about mirror neurons. For example, I just give one example of a reflection of compassion happening in and of itself. So there was these two Italian professors, and they were testing the brainwaves of some monkeys, animal testing as usual, in a laboratory. And they were testing its pleasure-pain responses according to getting peanuts. And when every time he got a peanut, the satisfaction of it would make the bell go ding, ding, ding. And then one time one of the professors came in and he himself took a peanut, and the monkey was watching, and the bell went ding, ding, ding. And this kind of woke him up like that, and he did it several times, and the experiment was repeated with scans to see what's exactly happening, and this is how they discovered mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are very expansive areas of the brain, very receptive, that when you really put your consciousness on another person, they begin firing, in tune totally with the experience of the other person. And then, of course, it unravels and it makes total sense. You're watching football and, the guy misses the penalty and it's like, oh! You feel the whole thing through your body. So this isn't learned behavior, it's natural behavior. We experience each other's experiences as if they were ours. And that's just on the most physical level of compassion. When I was one, my brother hurt his leg and it was bleeding a lot, which was no big deal. He got a plaster and all of this, but I'd just learned to walk, and I stopped walking for a week. I took it in as mine. It's like, it's a given. And this instinct of compassion, again, it can't be got or lost. It's always here. It's the default position. It's a non-dual position. And this can be affirmed only by your own experience, by checking it. And it's totally okay to be cynical, and in the end compassion will come forward also that way. The exercise of Tlong Long, for example, which is a practice, like a discipline, it sounds very ethical to put yourself in the shoes of the other, which is in all the mystical traditions, to imagine you are them, is actually getting the person out the way. You let go of your person, otherwise how could you go into the person of the other? So it clears the space of the kind of absolute real nature of my individual person. Just by its very movement, it's a movement of getting out the way, so the compassion is seen of itself, it comes forward. And actually that is the compassion. It's not obvious that this is the non-dual position for the fear and anger twin spiral. But even the Dalai Lama, in his book The Way of Happiness, he writes about compassion as the antidote to fear. He kind of sees fear and anger as the main afflictions and the main dangers and the main cause of suffering, not dangers, the main cause of suffering, and compassion he sees as the antidote. And it really works. And that's a main one, because it's going to come up again and again. You want to round up a bit?
I think it's a break. I think it's enough.
It's not necessary to grasp everything and all the details, because it's also written down as a reference. We're busy printing it now. We ran out of paper, so we're going to work with this stuff. Tomorrow we're going to go more into the separate self, which is trauma, where we become separate from an aspect in a very more severe way.
I have a question about the neurons and the cement. Has that something to do with each other? The trauma, the contraction, and the neurons?
Yeah.
It has, because that is also what I feel is happening. When you said my brother had something, and then I felt also the pain of the brother. So is there a correlation between the cement or the construction and the mirror neurons?
Yeah. So the mirror neurons, it's very, very fine energy, the mental energy, and it moves through the cement.
Okay.
It's like in the gaps between the cement. It's where the separate self it just disappears in that moment on a physiological level. But a contraction, like if we're suddenly afraid, what happens is the mirror neurons stop firing, and another chemical, and I can't remember its name, comes forward in the brain, which is very much like what they put in some antidepressants, which makes stupid in a way.
Okay.
So you become very rigid and very resistant and can't take in information. It's like it becomes not a porous sponge anymore or a channel, the brain, but it fixes on what it knows. So brain activity goes down incredibly, and mirror neurons stop firing. So what they saw with those same rats, this is kind of bad news, the ones that were helping their fellow rat to come out of the cage, they gave it antidepressants, the rat, the helpful rat, and then it couldn't give a shit about the animal in the cage anymore. And he just went and ate the cheese and was walking over it and couldn't care anymore. But this is leading also that rat into a kind of depression, because the reward of helping, the reward of service, the reward of stepping beyond its own private ratness towards the other rat is so great in terms of the chemicals that it releases, that this neuroscientist basically said at the end of the interview, it's like, don't take antidepressants, go and help somebody. Go do something for somebody else, it works better. You know, which is amazing. And of course service, doing something for somebody else, whatever it is, or for something else, or for the environment, is always releasing, moving through or beyond or behind, through a greater space, this private self, this cement, this contraction. Doesn't matter if we go like this or like this, but the moment we are of service to the other, we are saying, I am also the other, because we are expanding to the other, beyond this contraction. So this becomes small. You see how it works?
Yes.
So the guilt becomes much more relative, because we expanded like this. There was all this space now, like here, rather than being stuck behind the guilt. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Very cool.